everyone and welcome back. In today's video, we're going to be doing Chapter 5 NCERT Class 6 History Kingdoms, Kings, and an Early Republic. In the last 50 years, we are allowed to choose our leaders, but this wasn't common earlier. Around 3000 years ago, we find some changes taking place in which Rajas were chosen. Some men were became Some men now became recognized as Rajas by performing very big sacrifices. The Ashwamedha was one of them. It was a horse sacrifice. And the horse was let loose to go in different places, and then another um, if it wandered into another kingdom and the Raja stopped the horse, then it meant that they needed to fight. But if they let it go, it meant that the Raja accepted that the Raja who wanted to perform the sacrifice was stronger than them. These Rajas were then invited to the sacrifice, which was performed by specially trained priests, who were rewarded with the gifts. The Raja who organized the sacrifice was recognized as being very powerful, and all those who came brought gifts for him. He often had a special seat, a throne, or a tiger skin to sit on. His charioteer or his companion in the battlefield witnessed his exploits and chanted his tales of his glory. His relatives, especially his wives and sons, had to perform a variety of minor rituals as well. The priests performed the rituals included the sprinkling of sacred water on the king. The ordinary people or the Vish and Vaishya also got some gifts. Some people, known as Sudras, were regarded by the priests and they were excluded from many of these rituals. They were regarded as Shudras and were excluded. So, what are Varnas? Many books that were composed in North India, especially in the areas drained by the Ganga and the Yamuna during this period. These books, often called later Vedic, because they were composed after the Rig Veda, which we learned in the last previous chapter. These include the Samaveda, the Yajurveda, and the Atharva Veda. These were composed by priests and describe how rituals were to be performed. They also contained rules about the society. There were several different groups at this time: priests and warriors, farmers, herders, traders, craftspersons, laborers, fishing folk, and forest people. Some priests and warriors were rich, as were some farmers and traders. Others, including many herders, craftspersons, laborers, fishing folk, and hunters and gatherers, were poor. The priests divided people into four groups called the Varnas. These were as these were as such. The Brahmins were the first Varna. They were expected to study and teach Vedas and perform sacrifices and receive gifts. In the second place were the rulers, also known as the Kshatriyas. They were expected to fight battle and protect people. Third were the Vish or the Vaishyas. They were expected to be farmers, herders, and traders. Both the Kshatriyas and Vaishyas could perform sacrifices along with the Brahmins, but they didn't have to because they were like the main people who did it, who were meant to do it. They were the priests and the high valued people. Mm-hmm. Last were the Shudras, who had to serve the other three groups and cannot perform any rituals. Often women were also grouped with the Shudras. Both women and Shudras were not allowed to study the Vedas. The priest said that these groups were decided on the basis of birth, and later some were classified as untouchable. These included some craftspersons, hunters and gatherers, as well as people who helped perform burials and cremations. Many people did not accept the system of the Varna. Um, these were in the northeast where social and economic differences were not very sharp and where the influence of priests was limited. Some thought that it should not be based on birth. I'm just gonna highlight some things. The Shudras included the craftspersons, hunters, and gatherers, as well as people who performed burials and cremations. The Kshatriyas were farmers, herders, and traders. The Brahmins were the priests. Painted graveware and painted graveware plates and bowls were used on special occasions for important people and to serve as special food. They were painted out of graveware. Janapadas. These were rajas who performed big sacrifices and now recognized as being rajas or janapadas rather than just janas. Janapada literally means the land where the jana set its foot and settled down. Archaeologists have excavated a number of settlements in these Janapadas, such as Purana Quilla in Delhi, Hastinapura near Meerut, and Atranjikira near Ita. They found that people lived in huts and kept cattle as well as other animals. They also grew a variety of crops like rice, wheat, barley, pulses, sugarcane, sesame, and mustard. Here, sugarcane is an addition as it was not there during the Harappan civilization. They made earthen pots. Some of these were grey in color, others were red. The grey pots had painted designs, usually simple lines and geometric patterns. Mahajanapadas. About 2,500 years ago, some Janapadas became more important than the others and were known as Mahajanapadas. They had a capital city and many of these were fortified. This means that they were they had huge walls around them of made of brick, stone, or wood. Forts were probably built because people were afraid of attacks from other kings and needed protection. It is also likely that some rulers wanted to show how rich and powerful they were, and by building really large, tall, and impressive walls around their city, they showed this. Also, in this way, the land and the people living inside the fortified area could be controlled more easily by the king. This is a fortification wall at Kaushambi. This is found near present-day Allahabad, which was probably built about 2,500 years ago. The new Rajas now began maintaining armies. Soldiers were paid regular salaries throughout the year. Some payments were probably made using punch-marked coins. The picture is in another chapter. As the rulers of the Mahajanapuras Padas were A. building huge forts, B. maintaining big armies, they needed more resources. They did this by collecting regular taxes. Taxes on crops were the most important because most people were farmers. This was 1/6 of what was produced and known as bhag or share. There were taxes on craft persons. This was in the form of labor. For example, a weaver or a smith may have had to work for a day every month for the king. Herders also paid taxes in the form of animals and animal produce.
There were also taxes on goods that were bought and sold through trade.
Hunters and gatherers also provided forest produce to the Raja. These forest produce could include things in the forest, like sometimes it can be,
Fruits,
well, not
hunted
really.
animals, maybe.
It can be like elephants and stuff. Changes in agriculture. There were two changes. One was the growing use of iron plowshares. This meant that heavy clayey soil could be turned over better than with a wooden plowshare, so that more grain could be produced.
Second, people began transplanting paddy. This meant that instead of scattering the seed on the ground from which plants would sprout, saplings were grown and then planted in the fields. This
This led to increased production as many more plants survived. It was back-breaking work and was usually done by dasas and dasis, which were the slave men and women, and the landless agricultural laborers. No,
Kamakuras.
yeah, they had to do this work.
A closer look. Mahagad.
Magad.
Yeah.
It had it had the most important Mahajanapada in about 200 years.
Many rivers such as Ganga and Sun flowed through Mahagad.
This was Magad. This was important for transport, water supplies, and making the land fertile.
Parts of Magadha were forested.
This meant that elephants could be captured and trained for the army. Forests also provided wood for building houses, carts, and chariots.
Besides, there were iron ores mined in the region that could be tapped to make strong tools and weapons.
It had two of the very powerful rulers, Bimbisara and Ajatashatru.
Who used all possible means to conquer other Janapadas.
Mahapadmananda was another important ruler. He extended his control up to the northwest part of the subcontinent.
Raja Griha, present day Rajgir in Bihar was the capital of Magad for several years.
Later, the capital was shifted to Patliputra, present day Patna. Around 2300 years ago, a ruler named Alexander, who lived in Macedonia in Europe, wanted to become a world conqueror. He had conquered parts of Egypt and West Africa and came to the Indian subcontinent, reaching up to the banks of Beas.
His soldiers refused because they were scared as they heard that the rulers of India had vast armies of foot soldiers, chariots, and elephants. A closer look. Waji.
Vajji, with its capital at Vaishali, Bihar, was under a different type of government, known as a Gana or Sangha.
In the Ghana or Sangha, there were not one but many rulers.
They met in assemblies and decided what they had to be done, what had to be done, and how through discussion and debate.
However, women, dasas, and kamakuras could not participate in these assemblies. Both the Buddha and Mahavira, about you'll learn later, belonged to the Ganas or Sanghas.
Some of these descriptions can be found in Buddhist books. Gana is used for a group that has many members. Sangha means organization or association.
This is an account of the Vajis from the Digha Nikaya, a famous Buddhist book, and that contains speeches of the Buddha. These were written about 2300 years ago.
Ajatashatru wanted to attack the Vajjis, so he sent his minister Vasakara to Buddha to get advice on his matter. And he told these things. They aren't that important, I think.
Rajas of powerful kingdoms tried to conquer the Sangas. Nevertheless, they lasted for a very long time, till about 1500 years ago.
when the last of the Ganas and Sangas were conquered by the Gupta rulers. And that's the chapter.
Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and this was just a revision. Thank you.